you guys knew me. I always liked Joe Rogan. You know, like I always, for years, I've been listening. And I saw it, and I'm like, there are millions of people out there who want something like that. So that's all I did, you know, was create a news channel for them.
This is Saagar Enjeti. He, along with his co-host Crystal Ball, host the Breaking Points news show on YouTube. The show defines itself as fearless and anti-establishment.
Crystal, who's on the left, and Saagar, who's on the right, and they're honest and they're intelligent and they talk about things and they disagree, but they're also friends and they've been on the podcast together. But they'll tell you, here's the issues, and this is why this is wrong, and this is why this is corrupt, and here's the influences, and this is where, you know, you're being misled.
Previously, they had a show on Hill TV, The Rising. But then, for a bunch of different reasons, both of them together decided to leave.
To all of you who came up to me on the street and told me how much the show means to you, it means a lot. So thank you, and we'll see you soon. June 1st, 2021. So we left the Hill. It was very dramatic. We're rolling.
So, guys have a new show.
Hey, Joe, what's up?
I just want to say, I told you, I knew it was going to work.
Yeah.
Dude, this is amazing. Like, we're free.
I knew it was going to work. I was like, why are you like trapped?
Crystal and Saagar took a huge risk. They cut all corporate ties and counted upon the community they had built.
My bet is the chart of distrust in the mainstream media. I was like, oh, that's like 90% of the population. I was like, that's my audience.
That audience was not only willing to watch their new show, they even bankrolled it through paid subscriptions.
We want to build this into a real thing. We want to take on CNN, Fox, and MSNBC, and these people are ripping us apart. They are making millions of dollars of doing it, and all I want to say is screw you.
Yeah.
Because you know what? There's another way.
The show just completed 1 year and is wildly successful. So I wanted to talk to Saagar about his journey so far. The journey of creating a successful digital news show from scratch. Oh, and by the way, that's me. My name is Sagnik. I'm a producer. Maybe someday I'll tell you my story. But for now, you're watching how the sausage gets made.
Actually executing something is 10 times more difficult than it actually sounds.
This show is about the journeys of disruptive creators.
Getting the shit to come out on time is a daily battle.
Their days in the trenches.
I remember growing the show from 5,000 people a day to 10,000, then 10,000 to 15,000. I lived and I breathed this.
The daily grind of being a content creator.
Spend all day looking for stories, looking at stuff to cover, talking to people, you know, it's a lot of work.
Overcoming creative barriers.
And the why, we talked about this. It's an I in happiness. There's no Y in happiness, it's an I.
This video is not processing on time. The email software is not working. I'm like, okay, here's the fix, here's the fix, here's the fix.
How they run their businesses.
Each individual deal has to be negotiated, you know? Managing the content flow on the channel itself. So there's just so much on the back end.
Contracts they signed along the way.
So was it a mistake for me to go to the Hill and build up IP? Like, not really, right?
Contracts they didn't sign.
That's what a lot of people don't understand. When they take venture cash, they're signing up for certain growth targets and stuff, which do not comport with what news actually looks like.
Some small talk about their personal lives.
I had to step as far away from them all as possible.
And some big talks about the creator economy.
No, you cannot build a business off YouTube AdSense. And anybody who thinks they can is an idiot.
You see, being a creator is not easy. And it's definitely not a quit your 9 to 5 and start something tomorrow fantasy either.
You be flat broke if you do it and you don't do it right.
It's painstaking and oftentimes a lonely journey.
Most people just look at the success on this side and they're like, oh, you know, the show is huge, like it's doing really well. It's like, you don't know what we had to do.
Making money, being creative, and doing what you love is an awesome idea. But ideas are cheap and execution is everything.
It did not click home for me until I was walking home one day. And some lady came up to me and she's like, I love your show. And I was like, whoa. This is real now. Like, this is a real thing.
5, 4, 3, 2. All right, cool. 1 year, man.
1 year. It's pretty amazing.
Did you think that it would come so far and consistently?
No, honestly. I mean, if I think back on it, my goal was I wanted to have 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. I was like, okay, I'll be happy at 500. I wanted just to be able to pay our bills. I mean, I didn't know if we were gonna, I mean, I was telling you guys before we started filming this, but we have a big payroll in terms of studio cost insurance costs. Now we have people who work for us. Our editing costs are high. And making sure that it looks proper. I mean, we all talked a lot about making sure that the cameras look right, that the background looks right, that everything works properly. We had to get our graphics package designed by a guy who literally worked for Disney in order to make sure that it all looks proper. So my main goal was, I was like, I just want to cover this payroll. You know, I mean, everybody, whenever you're about to start your own venture, your own business, you just think
Break even.
break even.
Yeah.
Break even is the goal, you know, the North Star. But then people showed up for us in a big way, you know, right before we even launched. And I realized, I'm like, okay, we're gonna be okay. Like, we're gonna pay these bills. And then you just start iterating. You're like, okay, how can I build even more?
Walk me to the launch day, like when you hit launch.
Launch day was June 1st, 2021. So we left the Hill. It was very dramatic because they pulled some stuff in terms of our goodbye video. So we're waiting. We have like 3 days, okay? We're waiting while all this is happening. And our plan is, and we told people, you sign up at this link. It was like crystalandsaagar.com, I think. And you just put in your email. And it goes into, like, we own the email. It goes into a MailChimp listserv. Some 65, 70,000 people or whatever signed up. So we're like, oh my God, like, this is going to be amazing.
Already?
So we're, no, not as a subscriber, but like to be notified of like what we're up to. Contractually, we weren't able to say what we're up to until June 1st. So June 1st, morning of, I wake up, it's like 6 a.m. in the morning. Everything, I've been obsessing over this with Crystal for like weeks. Like, we've written the email, copy, the website, everything, like waiting to go live. So like hours tick by and like we're getting everything ready and I'm sitting there and I'm ready to hit send at, so I think we promised them it would come out at 8 a.m. in the morning. Waiting, I hit send, nothing happens. And MailChimp flags it as spam or something like that and prevents it from being sent out.
Email just goes to
Email,
spam.
yeah, no, it didn't even send.
Oh.
It refused to send for some internal MailChimp reason. And at this point, we'd sunk all this money into MailChimp. We had no idea what the problem was. We couldn't figure it out. It lasts maybe over 2 hours while we're waiting for all of this, for the launch thing to go out. And I'm on the phone. I can't get through MailChimp customer service. Finally, Marshall has a good idea, and he's like, you know what you should do? Tweet about it. I tweeted about it. It was solved within 5 minutes. Like, I was like, MailChimp is preventing us from being able to, and literally within 5 minutes it was solved, and the email finally went out. But the cool thing was that even before the email went out, the website that we'd been directing people to go to, we transferred it at exactly that morning over to our actual subscription page. And even though the email hadn't gone out, people started signing up that I could see. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. And so launch day, we were able to see, we were like, okay, this is gonna work. Like, people showed up for us in a big way. And like, that was really, I'll never forget it. It was like a life-changing experience.
Just to rewind a little bit, what is it like when you guys first had the thought of like venturing out by yourself while still existing without a corporate infrastructure? What was it like? Like, did it feel like you guys were like hiding something?
I mean, we talked a lot about this before. It's more about just like little things that you wouldn't be able to, I mean, I'll give you an example. You know, this week, I covered this whole thing about what I thought was like a corrupt act by the White House Correspondents Association. I mean, there's no way I could have done that when I was at the Hill because they are in the White House Correspondents Association. And if I talk shit about the White House Correspondents Association president, he's going to go and talk shit to the editor-in-chief of the Hill, and they're going to come and squeeze me. This happened multiple times. Different politicians that I talked about, different companies that I talked about, and they would try and squeeze me by calling the boss, and it was just causing too many problems. And like, we did not feel like we could be true to ourselves. Here's the other thing. Where was the value coming from? The Hill was making a lion's share of the money that the show was generating, and they were also generating money on it by getting corporate sponsors and stuff who we didn't agree with and who we didn't even want. So we're like, hey, we're the product. Are people coming from the Hill or are people coming from Crystal and Saagar? And the more I thought about it and the more I looked at the internet and all that, I was like, you know, I see no reason why we should stay here. So Crystal and I talked about it for months and months and months, planned the launch, all of that. I mean, it took a lot of work, man. I mean, in terms of lining up our deal with Supercast and making sure that we had an ability to go out on our own, talking to YouTube about setting up our channel before we went live. It was 6 straight months of solid work in order to get it all done.
People talk a lot about like product market fit or whatever. but at the same time, a lot of people just want to also like just scratch their creative itch.
Yeah.
At what point, maybe while you guys were at Hill or afterwards, you realized that there is a product market fit and I'm not just scratching my itch?
Yeah.
Like, when did you realize that you're actually filling up a white space?
So numbers are numbers until they're not. So I knew the show was doing well before it hit 100K subscribers on YouTube, which, you know, at the time was like big deal, you know. And I remember we hit like 30,000. I was like, I can't believe like 30,000 people subscribe to The Hills. Like, that's crazy. And then I would watch the daily numbers and they would just tick up and up and up. You know, at first it'd be 100,000 people watch today, then it'd be 200,000 people, then 300,000. But it did not click home for me until I was walking home one day and some lady came up to me and she's like, I love your show. And I was like, whoa, like, this is real now. Like, this is a real thing now. I'd never experienced that my whole life. That's when it clicked. When it's like, it's not just about numbers. It's like when real people come up to, and that happens to me like all the time. But at the time, it was like a big deal. And I was like, wow, like somebody literally just random on the street, you know, watched the show. That was when I knew it was a thing. It wasn't the numbers. It was when you start to meet people. And then it started happening all the time, you know, people out in the wild. And that's when I was like, wow, this is really crazy. Like, this is nuts. Because you know that something doesn't just resonate. A lot of people watch stuff. Okay, I watch a lot of stuff on YouTube. But for you to go up to somebody and be like, hey, your show really helped me, this, and this, that's when I was like, this is real, you know?
So in a more literal sense, like in that story, like an audience like such, like they found you. So like, do you think your story is more of like you finding the audience or the other way around?
Both. I mean, it's a little bit of both.
But you were like not targeting this particular demo?
No, I was. My plan with Crystal was, let's reimagine our show, The Hill. Let's go after people who are underserved, who are not getting their news the way that they want it. I knew that was a big market. That was my bet. My bet was people hate the mainstream media, so let's do a show that looks mainstream but isn't mainstream. That's it. Very simple. And, you know, I'm friends with a guy. He's a billionaire. He told me always bet on charts. And like my bet is the chart of distrust in the mainstream media. I was like, oh, that's like 90% of the population. I was like, that's my audience. And, you know, start small. Like initially we'd have a lot of Democrats because it was, there was a lot going on in terms of the Democratic primary at the time, but I knew it was bigger than that. I was like, this isn't about, you know, partisan. This is about a huge swath of people out there who are just like, feel disaffected, hate the mainstream, they want to have the news, but they don't know how to get the news, or they hate the current form of news. I mean, look, you guys knew me. I always liked Joe Rogan. You know, like I always, for years, I've been listening. And I saw it, and I'm like, there are millions of people out there who want something like that. So that's all I did, you know, was create a news channel for them.
When you venture out, like a lot of people kind of like romanticize the idea of like leaving their 9-to-5 gig to start on their own independent. What would you tell someone to consider before they venture out?
You'd be flat broke if you do it and you don't do it right. I mean, here's the truth. I did this shit for 2 years straight at the Hill with Crystal. Every day. I knew I had a show that people would watch. Crystal and I had a book, which we sold tens of thousands of copies for, so I knew people would pay for something that we did. I had all these little test cases, if you think about it, you know? I had these little things that we did that we knew that people were willing to follow us, people were willing to pay, people were willing to support the work, the people would watch every day. If you don't validate every single one of those before you try and go out on your own, you're gonna fail. Here's the other thing. Scale is really important. I'm very fortunate, Crystal and I. We have a lot of people who watch our stuff. There's only 2 ways this stuff works. You either go niche or you go scale. So you either be a star within your niche or you have to have a wide scale. We're a little bit of a mix of both, but enough so that I knew it was probably going to be okay. But look, a lot of this is variance and a lot of it are bets. The cautionary tale is if you have an overinflated ego and you're not honest with yourself about your numbers, it's not going to happen. I have people who come to me and they're like, I have 100,000 Twitter followers. Do you think I could get, they're like, the law of the internet says 3 to 7% will subscribe. So I should be okay, right? And I'm like, no, dude. Like, Twitter is not even close to the same as somebody who watches you on YouTube every day. And by the way, I don't count a single view. I count uniques. I only look at uniques. Same thing whenever it comes to people who actually download, listen, even on print. You can't just count somebody in your actual audience who listens to you or who clicks on your stuff one time. You're never going to convert that person. Never. Extremely rare. They have to listen to you on average of probably like 10, 15 times before they're about to come to you. Think about the amount of trust that it engenders. So you have to be ruthlessly honest. How big is my actual audience? How many of them are actually willing to pay? Run micro experiments before you actually run. I mean, you know, a lot of the books here, that's the story I've learned from people who really succeed, which is that most people just look at the success on this side and they're like, oh, you know, the show is huge, like it's doing really well. It's like, you don't know what we had to do, you know, for years. Like I remember growing the show from 5,000 people a day to 10,000, then 10,000 to 15,000, then 15,000 to 16,000, 16,000, 17,000. I lived and I breathed this. Crystal and I literally did this for every single day for 600 days. And only then were we willing to, even then we were terrified. We didn't know if it was going to work, you know? So put in that amount of work, and in my opinion, there's basically no way you can fail. But that's the cautionary. The cautionary tale is most people don't work that hard.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but like a lot of people, especially in like the DC media circle, they misinterpret validation from like the blue check crowd in their Twitter thread as having an audience market.
That's not an audience. That's fake. That's actually an anti-audience.
But there is a meaning to it. I mean, there is a market for it. Like that serves a purpose.
Yeah, but that's, how many people is that? Maybe 15,000?
Yeah.
That's nothing. That's not even a mid-tier podcast. You can't do anything with 15,000. You wouldn't even be in the top 2% of podcasts in the United States. So if you're in DC media, honestly, I see people like that. They're like, over 12,000 people listen to us this month. I'm like, that's not the brag that you think it is. I'm like, maybe a donor will give you money for that. I'm like, if you only have 12,000 downloads a month, like I don't even think you could sell an ad on that. Like even a dynamically inserted ad. So, and also there's also a difference in viewership. So this is another thing I caution my friends who are in entertainment. Entertainment view is not the same thing as what I do. Well, you could get millions of views on a viral video, which is some stupid shit where you guys are like laughing and pulling pranks. That doesn't mean people are going to pay you to do it. You know, those views are actually marginally not worth nearly as much as somebody who sits with me for over an hour and a half and listens and trusts what I have to say. Does that make sense?
So the value is in like the recurring audience.
Not only recurring, but the value that they derive from your content. So like I fundamentally just don't derive that much value from people who I watch in order to laugh. But I derive a shit ton of value from people I watch in order to inform me, if that makes sense. So there may be less in the latter category, but it's worth more money in the long term.
So you said like inform me, that's why I'm asking this. How do you think about having the consumer mindset versus the producer mindset? Because like you were not always an on-screen person. You had to like get into this mindset that I am a content creator now who's gonna be on camera. And what was that process like? Was it gradual? Was it like a step one, step two thing?
I mean, I was doing the show anyway. I was guest hosting the show. I've always been relatively comfortable with the camera. And honestly, it's not that hard to learn. Like if you can speak cogently, it's really not that difficult. Like I did enough television hits in order to have, I've probably done over 100 Fox. Yeah, probably something like that. Like 100 appearances on Fox ever before I even had this job. So obviously that is little things. I mean, you know, right now people can't see this, but there's a guy walking around behind us with a camera. That doesn't bother me at all because I'm used to it. But that bothers a lot of people. Or right now, if I had an IFB in, like, and somebody could literally speak to me while I'm doing this, and I wouldn't lose my train of thought, and I would be completely fine. These are little tiny things, but we don't need to go that into it. Most people don't. My theory is if you can speak relatively cogently, the only thing that you really need to practice is like what I'm talking about is the ability to keep talking when there's distractions. So if he over there, you know, drops something, this is a live TV skill and also one that I think not enough people who are performers have, which is that you got to go with the flow, man.
Yeah.
I think news in particular teaches you that. Actors, I've noticed, they're terrible at it. Like everything has to be silent
the way
on set.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you can't. I mean, look, maybe, you know,
Yeah.
because they do multiple takes. We're not in the multiple takes business.
How do you personalize your audience when you're just talking to the camera? Like, do you think about like the comments I'm reading are the people who are listening to me right now? Like in your head, do you think like I'm talking to someone? Like let's say Crystal's not there right next to you.
Honestly, I don't really think about it. Like, I don't think that I'm talking to someone. I write, at this point, I know people are gonna watch it.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I know someone's gonna watch. So I write how I always write. Like maybe this helps that I came up when I was working at the Daily Caller, we would write for a general interest audience. So I've always written and spoken for normal, average people. So I just think like, hey, what's the easy way of explaining this to somebody who doesn't have a lot of time and wants to know what the hell is going on? That's it.
Let's talk about, you said Daily Caller. So like you used to write for a living. You were a journalist. And then
I never really enjoyed that though. Writing.
when did you realize that you're not enjoying it?
When I would do TV. I just enjoyed TV. I'm better at summarizing a lot of information in a short period of time in the spoken word than I am at writing. Writing to me is arduous. It really, it takes a lot out of me. I have very, very high exacting standards. I read a lot of books, and I read a lot of really, really good writers. So when my writing, I don't think my writing is very good. I don't think I'm a particularly good writer. I think I'm a good writer for myself in order to speak, like for my monologues on the teleprompter. But writing to me was a means to an end. I was like, here's the thing, I'm better at it than the average person. And also, a monkey can learn how to do news writing. Headline, lead, nut graph, details. Keep it under 500 words. If it's a short story, 750 to 1,000. If you're writing descriptively, it's really not that difficult. So,
did you do like a lot of public speaking in college or whatever? Like, how do you realize that you're good at it?
Yeah, I was always been good at this. I mean, I was, in acting when I was a kid. I did public speaking when I was in high school, Model UN, debate. I was a debate champion in the state of Texas. So, obviously, I mean, the stuff is there. I didn't realize so many people are afraid of public speaking.
Oh, a lot of people.
Yeah, a lot.
Terrified of it.
Yeah, I don't know.
I used to be.
I've never been. I've never had a problem with it since I was like a little kid.
You used to be a journalist and you used to be like a 9-to-5 worker, and that life is completely different from what you live right now.
Yeah.
In terms of like you having your own entity. Like, what has that shift been? Like, you failing doesn't just mean that you are yourself failing.
Yeah.
A lot of other people who depend on
that's
you
right.
also fail. Talk to me about that mindset.
Yeah, it's hard, man. I mean, I think about it all the time. It's a lot more pressure, right? Like, a lot of people can just leave work and they leave work. Like, even when this is something I try to explain to people because they're like, well, you're not busy, you're at home. I'm like, you don't understand. Like, I'm always busy. I'm always like, how's the business doing? Did I pay my accountants? Oh, so-and-so needs something. Oh, you've been invited to speak at X. We're planning this. And the amount of logistics, that I just think the number one lesson I've learned in business is actually executing something is 10 times more difficult than it actually sounds. For example, my show doesn't seem that hard, right? Getting the shit to come out on time is a daily battle.
Talk to me about like a day in life. Like, how do you prepare to how it gets delivered?
So Crystal and I do a call the night before. We plan the entire show. You guys cut our elements for us. So we put all of our elements in there. Then I wake up at 5:30 in the morning, so does Crystal. We review everything, make sure the news hasn't broken so that we can still cover on the show. Sometimes we have to scramble, sometimes I have to call you and I have to be like, hey, we got to redo the entire show for today. That's just how it goes. Get to the studio at like 7 a.m. I check on the camera guys. I'm like, hey guys, how's everything going? They tell me if there's any problems. Sometimes some things haven't loaded properly, so then we have to recut things or I have to come up with contingency plans. So then we could do that. We roll the cameras. That usually lasts like 2 hours. We do the actual show. Sometimes there's an editing malfunction or whatever that we have to fix in post-production. Then we get out of the show. I come to the control. I'm like, okay, any problems? There's usually like 5. This video is not processing on time. The email software is not working. I'm like, okay, here's the fix. Crystal and I have to go through that. We go through and we fix it. This is before the show even is out at 11 a.m. Then the show goes out. I'm like, okay, well, usually there's some problem, like some guy didn't get his email, some guy's spam filter's on, so we have to go make sure that's all okay. Then we have to write all the headlines to make sure for the public show. We have to make sure the description for the podcast looks good. So then all that, and then it finally airs at noon every day, Eastern Standard Time, right? So like, I just described like a lot. And then, then there's the reaction to everything that you said. And the funny thing is, by the time you're consuming it, I'm not even thinking about it anymore. I'm like, I already did that. That's over. What's next?
No, next day.
Yeah. So like, they'll be like, you said, well, I'm like, I don't even know what I said. Like, I'm focused on tomorrow. So then the process starts all over again. It's like, okay, Crystal and I and our producer, like we spend all day looking for stories, looking at stuff to cover, talking to people, it's a lot of work. And I just described the editorial process. I haven't even described the business process. So we have to negotiate contracts with our studio. We have to negotiate contracts on our podcast hosting. We, like we're planning events right now. Like I have to go and have to talk to all the event supervisors, and each individual deal has to be negotiated, And then, people are always coming to me with some business proposal or whatever. And I haven't even mentioned the fact that we hired all these partnership guys. I have like 7, 8 partners right now with Crystal. So each one of them has to be individually managed and approve or disapprove or whatever their content, and then managing the content flow on the channel itself. So there's just so much on the back end.
As you're like scaling up, do you have like a business model in head?
The business model is simple. I think of it as a 3-legged stool, which is we have podcast revenue, we have YouTube revenue, and then we have our subscriber revenue. That's it. So basically, one could fail, the other 2 won't fail. You just want to be diversified in your revenue stream.
What's the chunk of it right now?
I mean, honestly, they're all like relatively equal. So like which just makes it better, because it makes it so that if one fails, for people who don't know, YouTube AdSense fluctuates wildly. No, you cannot build a business on YouTube AdSense, and anybody who thinks they can is an idiot. So you have to be like absolutely certain you're going to be okay in other months. And also, because we cover news, a lot of our stuff gets demonetized. A lot of our content gets demonetized. So we literally cannot rely on it. That's one of the nice things about podcasts. They don't do that yet. So we have that. And then we also have our subscriber revenue. But the subscriber revenue is the one I care about the most, because that one is actually reliable, if that makes sense.
So you think right now, like let's say YouTube tomorrow completely just shuts down and you have to start over from scratch on something like Vimeo or whatever, and you can actually bank on the fact that those subscribers will travel with you.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I mean, we have their emails. We have their credit card, everything. Like we own our relationship with them. So yeah, I mean, it would suck if we lost YouTube, but like honestly, we'd be fine. Yeah.
So how important do you think that relationship is? Because like anytime someone talks about like IP and all that stuff, Andrew Callaghan, the guy who had All Gas No Brakes, that comes to my mind.
Yeah.
Like he was a 19-year-old kid who was just traveling around covering riots, doing dumb shit, and then this Instagram company who like handles all these meme pages, they reached out to him and said like, hey, we will pay you this much money, like 40 grand or whatever. We will pay for your RV and your production crew, and you will do what you're doing right now, but for us. And then came the banner, All Gas No Brakes. But then he decided that, hey, I don't want to keep doing this, and I want to also like include like serious commentary on this riot stuff. And then the Instagram page was like, hey, we are a meme page, we don't really care for this.
Right.
So he said that, hey, I want to dip, but they owned his IP.
Yeah.
So, and now
problem.
But they owned his IP. But at the same time, but even without him knowing, he had built this huge relationship with all his audience. So he started his own YouTube page called Channel 5, and it has more subscribers than he did.
Yeah.
So how do you think people should think about, or young people should think about IP and owning your content right now?
It's a tough one. It's a trade-off. I mean, I'd never be where I am without the Hill. So was it a mistake for me to go to the Hill and build up IP? Like, not really, right? I mean, at the end of the day, like I got a ton of benefit out of it. So I would just say, look, there may come a time in your relationship where you are the majority of the value and they are not. And at that time, you should leave. Look at Barstool. Call her daddy. They did that, right? I mean, a lot of people are doing it. And fundamentally, if you are the product, if you do derive a lot of the value, walking away from it is just not going to have that much of an effect on you, in my opinion.
Young people, especially in media and especially news, they have this not business model, they have this route of, hey, I'm just going to do some TikTok video for like a man on the street or whatever, and then I want some company to notice me, and then I will work for a steady paycheck. What do you think of that model, and do you think that's like a reliable thing for young people to bank upon?
Yeah, honestly. Look, most people cannot do what we do. Like, at the end of the day, it's hard for a reason. It's really hard. Like, getting an audience and having people who give a shit what you have to say is extraordinarily difficult. I tell people that all the time, There's a lot of people in the content game who are focusing on SEO and like headlines and thumbnails. I'm like, yeah, but content's not good. I'm like, that's all that matters. If you have shit content, you can't fix anything. Once you have good content, then you can focus on SEO and all that other stuff. But if the underlying asset is bad, there's no ability to dress it up.
So have a good product.
You have to have a great product, not good, great product. Look, it's 2022. It's not 2002. Like, there are a lot of people out there who are like, I'm going to give news from an X perspective. I'm like, nobody cares. You know what's a good example is comedy podcasts. At this point, you better be damn good. You better be top 0.01%, because there's so many comedy podcasts. I listen to like 5. Like, I don't have time, to listen to anymore. So if you're in a totally saturated industry, you better have a great take or a great niche or a great like innovation, because at this point, and then that's why I'm saying some people should work for a paycheck. Some people should work for a media company. A lot of people don't want to work this hard, to be honest. I mean, a lot of people don't put up with the shit that Crystal and I have to put up with. And I think that's fine.
Yeah, that's fine. That's a different life.
I'm like, hey, live,
Yeah.
you know, you're good. I didn't necessarily want to, I didn't know we were necessarily signing up for all this.
There's like two lines of thought when people think about the internet. One is like the market is saturated and all this, and the one is like you don't know how huge the internet is.
Yeah, the internet is massive. Yeah.
So like how do you balance those two thoughts?
The internet is such a big force that you can't even wrap your head around it. And not being able to wrap your head around it is good and bad. So I was worried, for example, about subscription fatigue. Subscription fatigue doesn't exist when you're talking to millions and millions and millions and millions of people, because, all you need is for 1 or 2 or 3% of them to make your business viable. Subscription fatigue is only real for top 0.1%ers like me. Most people only subscribe to like 1 or 2 things. You just have to go and speak to enough people in order to make sure that it's not there. So Ben Thompson of Stratechery said that. He goes, I don't think enough people appreciate how big the internet is, and I couldn't agree with him more, 100%.
Was there a learning curve of you realizing that, or did you just...
Yeah, the launch day, where I was like, holy shit. I was like, these amount of people are showing up for us. I was like, that's awesome. And I had no idea that would even happen. I was so worried. I was like, how many people are going to be able to subscribe? But, I was like, how many people already subscribed to like Glenn Greenwald or Matt Taibbi or something like that? It turns out that there's a huge amount of people who will subscribe to only one of those. But that's fine, as long as there's a big enough pool of people. That's the game.
So the pool exists. You have to find your niche, and you have to decide whether or not you're talking to a large group of people or you have like a niche audience.
Yeah, exactly right. And like, that's why niche is important though, which is that, look, at this point, again, finding a niche is, again, I'm not going to say it's hard, but your content better be pretty good. Like, you better be able to find and fill a space that nobody else is doing. So, like little kids love what I do, like as they're like, you're a YouTuber, which is fine, I don't care, that's cool. But they're always like, how do I get people to watch me? Like, I do gaming videos. I'm like, and I'm always like, and you're talking to a kid. You're like, yeah, but there's a lot of people who do gaming videos. So like, why should people watch you? And they're like, oh, I didn't think about that. And it's just like, you get that. That's,
what the funny thing is? Adults even don't think about that.
Yeah, nobody thinks about it. Yeah. You're like, hey, no offense, but like, PewDiePie is pretty good at this, like, and there's so many different gaming channels at this point. So I was like, why are you different? Like, what makes you better? Are you playing a game maybe that nobody else is playing? Because that's cool, because maybe there's 20,000 people who play that game. If you're playing like Call of Duty, like, what's going to happen? By the way, I don't even game, so, I don't really know what I'm talking about, but the basic principle is the same.
In terms of like white space, do you think anymore there is still white space in like online news coverage?
I don't know, because I already do what I do. I mean, here's the thing. Look at sports news online. Yeah. Barstool, Pat McAfee, Outkick, all of these guys are like big. So
bigger than ESPN.
They're big, exactly. So, I have to say yes. Like, I don't think we've even reached the tip of the potential.
When you thought of your business model, like if you think of like news, like cable news, there's this, I don't know if it's a bundling thing, right? So there's your live stuff, and then you have this commentary stuff. So when you realize that you want to start your own show, you knew that you wanted to unbundle the commentary element of it.
Yes, that's right.
Because like the live show already has its value. It's not bad. Right. Like when something happens,
live TV.
Yeah, so when something happens in Asia, you bet your ass you want a guy in Asia.
And also live TV is super expensive. I don't want to compete with that.
Explain. Yeah. People don't get how expensive live TV is. Just walk people through it.
It's astronomically expensive. I mean, live television costs tens of millions of dollars in contracts through the cable bundle. They have exclusive rights, and they've used the billions of dollars in profit that they've derived from the money that the cable companies pay them to invest in a live television infrastructure, which is astronomically expensive. Here's the thing. I don't want to compete with that. I have no interest in that. And by the way, they barely have any interest in it. How many times do things go live that actually need to go live? I don't know. Once a day, maybe? At best. The rest of the time, they're just doing what I do. They're just talking. So I can compete with that relatively, even though my costs are very high relative to your average podcast, it's manageable in order to strategically compete. So that you have to think about the ground that you're competing with other people on.
So you said like costs and stuff. So like as of now, what are the tools that you're using, and what do you think about those?
What do you mean? What
Like
tools?
Supercast.
Yeah, so we got
podcast
Supercast, MailChimp, Megaphone for hosting. What else? Those aren't the hard costs. The real expensive costs are like production, like cameras, studios, staff. Staff obviously being the biggest one. Like that's where the real cost and that stuff.
So like
comes in.
as you scale up,
Yeah.
how do you envision like keeping like paying the bills of those people?
Well, you only scale up what you can afford. So we don't hire anybody if we can't afford it. We're not going to finance it. I think a big problem that a lot of people have is that they take on investor cash, with these fake business plans and all this other stuff, and it never works out. Like
There's
I think,
like a lot of cautionary tale of this.
yeah,
as well.
I've seen this happen a million times. I mean, Mashable, BuzzFeed. I mean, BuzzFeed's firing a bunch of people right now. Like I do not want to fire anyone. Like I want slow and steady. I believe in like the old American way of doing business. It's just like,
yeah.
you start out with the show. Okay, the show's doing well. So now you hire some other guy, and then you hire another guy, and you post this stuff on your channel. And then it's all a feedback loop.
There's like two different mindsets. The one mindset is like the small business mindset, and then you have the venture mindset, right? So like the small business mindset is like you hire employees.
Right.
You only pay people what you can fire them for, like replace them for.
Yeah.
And the venture mindset is like you raise all this cash and then you want to pay them back, and then it gets complicated from there. Like, do you ever see yourself, like you didn't raise money, right? If I'm not mistaken.
No.
So like,
It's all
do
my
you
money.
ever see yourself going that route?
No, never. Because look, I know venture people. I have a lot of friends who work in venture. Venture needs $1 billion. News is not $1 billion bet. It never should be. I mean, outside of cable, I don't think you can make $1 billion doing this business. And that's fine. I mean, that doesn't mean you can not have a moderately successful small business. It's just that you should not be in the venture business. Like, that's what a lot of people don't understand. When they take venture cash, they're signing up for certain growth targets and stuff, which do not comport with what news actually looks like. That doesn't mean it can't be done. It just shouldn't be done with that specific investment model.
The problem with that is like when people think about venture money, it almost in most cases depends on a product which can be scaled, and there's a growth curve to it, and you have to deliver. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to keep increasing your audience. It just needs to scale exponentially. Whereas in news, there are way too many variables for you to achieve it.
Also, think about this. Like, tech has to grow exponentially all the time. News is a cyclical business.
Yeah.
News, you'll be in the doldrums sometimes. In 2021, we had COVID, but think about a normal time. Like, president just got elected, but a divided Senate, nothing's happening. It's a long day till election day, like that's just the nature of the game. It's incredibly cyclical. You acquire a lot of people during an election, and then they stick with you sometimes. People flex. Sometimes they come back to you only on the election. So that's just how it works.
If venture had to step in this model, and again, correct me if I'm wrong here,
they have, and they failed every single time.
I'm not saying like for like news commentators directly, but I'm saying like they can support the tools you are using, like Supercast, like scaling something like Supercast, scaling something.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like podcast hosting stuff, scaling the creator tools which people use to grow their business.
Yeah.
So like the venture will not support you.
Right.
They will support the tools you're using.
Yeah, but even then, I mean, you better have a hell of a lot of people, right? Because you're still only charging 6%. So if you're charging like 6 to 10% of somebody else's revenue, you better have a shit ton of revenue, in terms of people who are signing up and actually on that. And that's why, I mean, Supercast actually is not like this, but like Substack, for example, I like Substack, but I read that they'd raised like $100 million, which puts them at like $1 billion valuation. And I'm just like, yo, like, do you know how you'd have to have $10 billion worth of revenue on Substack in order for them to make $1 billion? So do they, like, ask yourself if that exists. That's a hell of a lot of work that you just signed up for. That's my question.
Ever since you shifted towards this having your own business route, and you used to be a journalist, and like we all know in DC, there is a circle of journalists, and there's a way of life and all that. How has that shift been, like saying no to the people you always hung out with, and like just like zoning out, starting something from scratch?
It's funny because I have intentionally had to remove myself from all of that so it doesn't color my thinking. Because my thinking has to be with the people outside of DC. So the more that I hung out with or socialized with or talked to people who were inside the system, the more granular my thinking would become, and it was almost getting tainted. So the more that I spend time outside of it, the better of an observer that I can be of it. And look, I mean, it's hard. Like, I used to be in the White House Correspondents' Association. I know a lot of these people. I know them personally, but I have to be critical sometimes just because that's what I think. Not really possible if we have social friendly relations. So I had to step as far away from them all as possible, really. And I'm sure a lot of them took offense, but like, to be honest, like I just had to, to be good at what I do, I have to be as far removed from the party apparatus and all that and really be like an observer. I have a foot inside, I can call if there's a problem, but I can't be inside the system. Being inside the system is like poison to my mind.
No, people talk about like you lose friends, you gain friends as well. And we saw that like ever since you stepped into this route, you went this, and it's like I don't think it's a cheap term, but I think it's a nebulous term, like influencer.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, whatever.
I don't like it, but yeah, I know what you're saying.
But in that realm, you gained so many people who not only realize that you're a good journalist, but they also realize that you're a good content creator.
Sure.
And other content creators are the first people who would notice
and
right. give you a pat on the back when other people make good content. So how has that been getting in the circle? Like,
that's cool.
Like being on Joe Rogan and like getting noticed by all these people.
That's definitely cool. I mean, I think what's cool is I have a lot of different interests. I like fitness. I like food. I like, I don't know, man. Like I watch like hunting channels and stuff. And sometimes I'll go and I'll like follow someone and he'll be like, bro, I love your show. I'm like, dude, I love your show. Yeah. Like, I'm like, don't talk to me. I'm like, I love you. Like, so like, that's cool. I think that's the coolest part. And it's true. Because I built this, I know, and Crystal knows too, like we can look at someone and be like, that's good. No matter what the sector is, like I can look at somebody who does like jelly beans reviews, but if it was good, I'd be like, that guy knows what he's doing, or that girl knows what she's doing. And I have a pretty discerning eye at this point. I've studied a lot of the big time YouTubers, David Dobrik.
Yeah, talk to me about like studying people who are outside the news. What's that radar in your head?
Well, for me, it's just like, it's all about retention. It's like, how do these people get people to have retention? And Mr. Beast, I've watched a lot of Mr. Beast videos. I've watched, I don't know if you guys remember this. Remember I used to talk about Jake Paul back in like 2017? Yeah, that was, I know what I was doing. Like, I study these guys. And I remember saying, I'd be like, there's something going on here. I'd be like, I don't know what this is. Like, there's something going on.
Maybe you don't even like it, but you
know
there was something there.
I don't like it. Yeah. I was just like, there is something going on here. So like I've always just been like vaguely aware. I watched a lot of David Dobrik videos.
I think that's a really good thing about you, and that's a necessary. Like, you need to meditate on the fact that a lot of people in DC are like people who go to college and like get their degrees and whatever and have their media degrees. They put themselves on a pedestal of being like, hey, I am a uppity journalist and like content creator. But at the same time, they don't have respect for what people are consuming in masses. Like, even a lot of journalists look down on TikTok. Like, it's fine, whatever you think about, like whatever. Like, but there is an audience, there is a market, and you have to respect the market, and you have to meet people where they are.
That's what I do. I respect people. I don't judge people. You get it how you want it.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, okay, that's happening. That's interesting to me. That's all I'm interested in.
You met your audience where they are, and I saw that slope, like that transition from like, it was a YouTube show, then it was a Spotify thing.
Yeah.
Then there are clips on Instagram.
Right.
Then there's a TikTok now.
I meet them everywhere.
Yeah.
Wherever you are, I'll be there. You tell me what you want. I'll try. If I can afford it, we'll meet you there.
So what's your message to like up and coming journalists who are thinking about, like, people always talk about the Marshall McLuhan code, like medium is the message, right? How do you think about different mediums, and how do you think people should think about it?
That's tough. I love YouTube. I'm all in on YouTube. I think YouTube is the most powerful social media platform on planet Earth. And I don't even think people really have grappled with how powerful it is yet. It is only going to get bigger from where it is today, and it's probably going to be exponential. So I am a fan. In the news category, I do not think it can be done well in short form. I'm not saying it can't be done. I don't think it can be done well. I think the news requires nuance. Nuance means that you need time. Time means that Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat are not your friends. I'm not saying that it can't work, but that type of news is much more about, let me tell you what's happening here. Not a, like, here's what's happening, and here's one side of the debate, and here's the other side of the debate, and then here's what I think. You just can't do it on TikTok. So that's why I love YouTube. I like time, I like space, and I think that's why a lot of people like it. I think about content as in something is either can be done in 5 seconds or it takes 5 hours. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, so, and there really is no in between. And cable is the in between. That's why it sucks.
It does.
Because it's not long enough to have nuance, and it's not short enough to be able to be shareable.
Got it. Last
Yeah.
question. 1 year since Breaking Points, what's next in the next year?
Keep breaking points, man. Just
Yeah.
gotta keep growing
What's
it.
your growth? Like, not numbers, like what's your vision?
I want more content partners. I want more live ability. I want to make it so that Crystal and I don't have to involve ourselves as much in the day-to-day business and can focus much more on the content, because the day-to-day stuff, it just eats your time. It just eats away from doing what you got into this business in the first place to do.
I think a lot of people also, again, like, do not realize, like, the people who want to leave their job for an independent gig, they don't realize the back end of it.
Yeah, man. Like,
And that's just like,
Pay-
it's not just
payroll.
arrogant, it's
Yeah.
like so delusional.
yeah.
Like, how dare you like just think about the fact that being on camera is the only part of your job.
I wish it was the only part. That's the easiest part. It's the most fun part. The most fun part is doing that. The hard part is payroll, accounting, taxes. Oh God, I mean, there's so
Healthcare.
There's so healthcare. God, I didn't even think about
Even like the
Um,
if you think about the media stuff, like,
it. Yeah,
oh, I can be on camera, but I don't really care about what the title of the YouTube video is gonna be. Like, are you kidding me?
but that's the hard part of the
Yeah.
job. The camera's easy. Get people to watch it. What about the thumbnail? What about this? Dude, I'm now like a mini expert on headlines, thumbnails, camera, video production, microphone. Dude, I don't even know. I don't even need to know, but I just know because of doing this. Like, I'm sure Crystal is too. Anybody who's in this game, like even your guys' cameras. Like, I'm not a videographer. I'm like, oh yeah, I know that type of camera. I'm like, we own that type of camera, and I need that type of camera. It's compatible with this, and oh well, the microphone doesn't work like on that, and cloud lifters and all this other stuff. Like, I'm not a savant, but I know a little bit about Premiere and frame rates and all. Again, I had to learn it. Like, you just learn a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
it's really
unless,
important.
Unless you're going
Yeah.
in a system that already exists to sustain what you have
Right.
to offer, which is like on-screen talents.
Yeah.
You have to think about those things.
That's more important.
Yeah.
Honestly, more important.
You can work
Yeah.
on developing your on-screen talents, and those are important, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, you have to understand not just the business, like everything that supports just you looking at the
Yes,
camera.
That's right. Oh man, I mean, teleprompter operator, teleprompter front, making sure that it at the right speed, little stuff, it all feeds in together. And it's all about a customer experience. And the experience is like a million different things. And so I wish it was just me talking in front of a camera. That would be the easiest part.
Do you think there is anything missing, or you can improve on the customer experience right now for Breaking Points?
Sure. I mean, I think that we're already working on the email system. We're fixing that. There's a lot that can be done. It just takes a lot of time. Technology is hard. Delivery is hard. And at the end of the day, what I've realized is that you have to be patient in this game too. There's a limited amount that you can actually adjust all at the same time.
And if you're patient enough, you get your reward.
There you go.
Cool.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.